Welcome to it. It's the Average Joe Sports Show live pod. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. You can join us in the stream and on YouTube and also on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pods, where you follow on Twitter, AJ Sports Show on YouTube. Like and subscribe, tell a friend, and we'll talk a little spring game for about an hour or so, or as long as you want to go. Dion is in first. Dion, good to have you. Justin checks in, y'all doing this live. Very fancy is what Justin's saying. But, fellas, pretty fun day yesterday with the spring game, the red v. the white, 25-21. But, how about number 15? Let's get it out of the way. How many Husker fans did you bump into either last night or today that they're still smiling about the Husker quarterback? Not just Dylan. All the quarterbacks played well. But, man, a lot of Nebraska fans, fellas, really smiling with what can be at quarterback. They saw it on display yesterday. It
just feels different. I mean, I think as we've gone through spring, we've kind of talked about it, and then everybody gets to see it in person. It feels different. I think for the first time in a while, Nebraska got that position right. We struggled so long to get the right quarterback and to provide hope. And I think all three quarterbacks that played prominently, they all showed improvement. But of course, 15 gets the most love and the most attention. But man, it feels different. I know we've talked about quarterbacks that have come in here in the spring and gone, man, that Tanner Lee. Yeah, this feels different on the poise, the vision, the ability to make all the throws, and his ability, what it does to open up the rest of the offense.
His poise was really impressive, for one, especially for being an 18-year-old guy who should be been at prom yesterday. But I don't think that really surprises us either. For those of us who have been around the Dylan Raiola Chronicles for the past 2 years. I think everybody got a pretty good idea that there is a different makeup, not just physically, because he's a physically imposing quarterback, but just his mental makeup. I think that certainly comes from his background, a great family. His dad certainly knows the game in and out. His mom is very much involved in leading his life as well. So I think that shows. One thing that, in retrospect, to think about it 24 hours later, I don't think it can diminish or put less importance on how significant Glenn Thomas's hiring has been at Nebraska, because I was really impressed with the improvement in Heinrich Haarberg. I thought the way he threw the ball and the way he conducted himself looked much more like a quarterback playing quarterback than, as I've said for a year, a tight end playing quarterback. So to think about how much Heinrich Haarberg has improved under Glenn Thomas and a dedicated quarterbacks coach, how much more does Dylan Raiola and Danny Kaelin improve from their high school careers to their college careers with a dedicated quarterback coach? And I know Dylan's going off to Kansas City and going to tutor down there, but I really think Nebraska's quarterback room is not just better because of those players, but I think that coach is having a significant impact.
Totally agree with the quarterback coach impact here with Glenn Thomas. And Sharpie, you've touched on how well he has worked in his career with young quarterbacks, be it at the pro level or going back to his time at Baylor with Rule. But I really like the numbers, but specifically just we saw all three levels of the passing game, right? And we saw the short game, be it some screens or some bubbles or the checkdowns. Saw the intermediate, which was nice. And then that pass to Lloyd, man, was still, I mean, you just saw it 1,000 times over and over on Twitter, but it was just dropped in a bucket perfectly into the wind. I mean, Raiola flicks the wrist. It's a perfect throw. And it was not awful coverage, but a guy like Lloyd can get a step or two on most people. And it was just perfectly placed. You had the first touchdown to Bonner with that go route to the end zone, about 16-yarder. You just saw all the throws, which was great. But I think if you look at what it can do for the offense, and you saw the run game being third, again, scrimmage, right? I get it. But you saw the run game being 3rd and 2 or 4th and short, where they can slam forward and get a yard or two. And it really looks like this offense could be very balanced, have a big-time thrower in Raiola, put the ball where it needs to be. And then you have the reality that Nebraska has so many weapons, guys, on this team to use. Tight ends, wideouts. Nair looked all right. You have Barney that had a nice spring game, but you got your trigger guy, and that's pretty big time for Nebraska. And he'll go hang out with Mahomes and company this summer to go be great, as he puts it.
Are you saying that you haven't seen a pass like that since Mike Stunts hit Eric Crouch? Is that the last time we saw a pass that pretty? Is that what you're saying, Schmidt?
I'm gonna go A&M 06 fade route to Maurice.
Well, what was a better pass by Dylan yesterday, where he dropped the ball in the bucket of Jalen Lloyd, or the 2-point conversion to Alex Bullock?
It's probably Bullock. Can I add one more here? That pass up the seam where he fits it in between the safety over the top and the corner underneath. I think it was a corner. He fits it up on the seam route, puts it only where the receiver can get it down around the knees, and leads his receiver away from the hit by throwing it down low. That was one of the most impressive throws I saw yesterday from Raiola. And as I think back on the game, like, we knew the arm talent was there. We've seen enough on film in high school, at camps, Elite 11. We knew there was arm talent. That's not what surprised me. What really surprised me is something we laid out talking about the poise of a kid that, as you said, should be going to prom next weekend. Like, a guy that's been on campus for just a couple of months, his control over the offense, to be able to calmly read the defense, make some checks pre-snap. And what really impressed me was after the snap of the football, I don't think the defense was probably doing too much on the back end. I'd have to go back and rewatch some all-22 film, which is hard to get your hands on. But what really impressed me was that I did not see Raiola put the ball into danger once yesterday. And that includes the interception. It wasn't a perfectly placed ball, but the decision was correct to try to get it on that slant route and get it out quick. Like, you go back and look at all of Dylan Raiola's passes yesterday. Not once did I see him truthfully put the ball into danger. You can make an argument on the 2-point conversion, but he trusted the arm talent and he squeezed that thing in there. Like, that's the number one most important thing, I think, in terms of can the arm talent translate into a winner on the football field, is can you make that arm talent, can you combine that with what's in between the ears, with your reading of the game? And he didn't put the ball into danger. He looked very confident back there. I was impressed with how he read the defense. That's almost what impressed me more. A guy that's been in the playbook for 4.5 months, a guy that's still trying to earn the respect of his teammates, trying to build chemistry with wide receivers. Like, it wasn't always perfect there. There were times a receiver cut a rod off flat and Dylan Raiola overthrew it. Like, that's going to happen early in a tenure. But what impressed me is the decision of the guy he decided to throw it to on any given play was always correct. That was one of the things I'll walk away from being super impressed with. I don't want to go hyperbole and say it's the most impressive quarterback performance I've seen in a spring game, though I think it's up there. Given the fact that he should be in high school right now. You don't see many freshman quarterbacks stand in there and perform like that against 20 to 22-year-olds, guys that have been in a college football program for a couple of years. And I know that the defense was not always the ones. There were reserves mixed in. Wasn't the best look you're going to get, but I was just really, really impressed with a guy being so young and being so confident in his ability to read the game and always deliver it to the right guy.
Well, I thought so. A couple of things there. I'm just blown away that you're going to sit down and watch the All-22.
I'd love to. It's I'm telling you, it's damn near impossible.
You can get a bootleg copy from a guy in Shickley, I'm sure.
I'm glad that's on your profile. Enjoy watching the All-22, do you?
I want the end zone view All-22. If any decision makers out there are listening, hit your boy up, email me, email the Average Joe Sports Show at the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com. Send us the All-22. I'll break it down live on the show. I'll even offer that right now.
Solo.
So one thing you said I think is absolute, and then Rule reiterated after the game. So he said it's going to be the little things, not the big things with Raiola. He did a couple of things. You can tell he's played football, a lot of football. And because there were, I think what you're alluding to, he took what he saw. He could have taken an underneath route, which I think Nebraska will be able to run a lot of them because there's touch on passes and it's just the ability to play pitch and catch. Instead, he went for the long ball, but he knows that on let's say 3rd and 8, and you're in field goal range, don't take a sack, okay? Maybe you're not able to get 10 to get the first down, and maybe only get 4, and that puts you closer for a field goal attempt, but don't take a sack, because he also made a throw that really won't be talked about that I marked down. Is there was one time where he just threw it out of bounds. Like, it wasn't open. He saw I think it was a post to the sideline, and I can't remember what wide receiver it was, but it wasn't, the defensive back was draped on him. And instead of trying to fit it in there with a big boy arm, he threw it where if the receiver makes a catch, it's an incredible catch. If he doesn't, oh, well, it went out of bounds. And so I think those kind of things are something that you're teaching is, you know what, we don't always need the big play. Take what is there, make the play, but don't put yourself in harm's way. And also, you know that he's watched a lot of film because he was able to process why he made the mistake on his interception. Okay, and he never tried that again during the game.
The temperament, fellas, that you have in Raiola is what could be difference making to pair with that talent. And Sharpie, you're right about living to fight another day. And quarterbacks with elite arm talent don't always do that, i.e., number 4 from Mississippi, right? Yeah. I mean, just as an example, Favre thought he could throw it through any defender and squeeze any ball to his wide receivers. He did a lot of times, won a Super Bowl, but you don't want to be bashful or afraid either. And I don't think you have that with Raiola, but I think you have competency and then no time and situation as well. I mean, he was able to, I was watching the Big Ten broadcast, and this is towards the end of that second quarter, and he's rolling, and then he just makes a safe play versus forcing one. Now, Nebraska didn't end up getting the field goal payoff. That being said, they still at least got set up for it. So I think you saw a lot of maturity, not only physical and gift maturity with what he can do throwing the football, but just from his approach and his temperament. Man, the future looks pretty sunny for Nebraska with Raiola. And listen, you can absolutely overreact, but it's great and okay to be happy if you're a Nebraska fan moving forward based on what you saw yesterday.
Hey, can we say this? Because I know a lot of the talk is about Dylan, and rightfully so. But it's okay to say Nebraska finally has gotten that position right, and that includes all 3 quarterbacks.
Yep.
I mean, Harburg had the throw of the day on that touchdown right over the pylon. Right. And if it goes to review, it might be down on the 1 yard line, but for now it's a touchdown. I mean, that was the throw of the day. And who would have thought yesterday going into the day that Heinrich Harburg would be the guy that had the perfect placement, that had the best pass of the day? I wouldn't have expected that going into yesterday. I was very, very pleasantly surprised with his development from a throwing point of view. I still think that there's a pretty wide gap between Raiola and Harburg. And I'd also say there's a somewhat wide gap between Harburg and Kalen. It's 1, 2, 3 pretty clearly. And I think that gap as we go through summer and into fall camp is probably going to widen between Raiola and the other guys. And that's okay. It's a credit to who Dylan Raiola is. But from what I saw yesterday, I feel pretty confident that Nebraska has a guy in Harburg that should you have to turn a football game over to him and he has to go close it out. I felt a lot more confident yesterday than I felt a week ago about what Heinrich Harburg brings to this offense. He was impressive, not as impressive as Raiola, but I want to give him his flowers because he's a guy, night and day is a little bit overused, and I'm not sure it's the right way to describe this, but he has made a big, big jump, I think, this offseason in a limited sample size from what we saw yesterday compared to what we saw at the end of last year. Specifically, I look back to that Michigan State game. Like the difference of Harburg between Michigan State and yesterday's spring game, I thought was pretty great.
He's going to get more yards, Harburg, on the ground, the tough yard on the ground, if you got to run the quarterback, than Dylan Raiola is. Raiola, he had that 9-yard run that just was kind of gliding out of bounds, and I'm heading out of bounds, and I'm committed to getting out of bounds, and picked up some nice yards on the play. But if you're going to have a quarterback that has to, barrel ahead and get you a tough 4, or 14 on a scramble, Harburg is still going to be the guy in that regard. Gary, you mentioned, getting the quarterback position right, and that would seem to be true with the room that they have now. I think in watching yesterday, they're getting the receiver room right as well. The number of people that caught passes yesterday, and Raiola threw to 14 different ones, playing for two different teams, right? But the number of they threw the ball 51 times, completed, 33 of 51 yesterday. There were very few just flat out drop passes that I can recall. I think that there's some pretty sure-handed guys that were running good routes and getting open. And yeah, they didn't have the pressure of Hutmacher and Robinson, and the quarterbacks weren't getting hit and feeling, 100% heat. But receivers were running routes, getting open, and making catches when the ball was put in their hands. And I think the depth that Nebraska has apparently and the speed at receiver is pretty significant. And one guy who didn't catch a pass yesterday is the one who's probably their best, and that's Jamal Banks. He didn't play. Naor was out there a little bit, had a couple of catches. Malachi Coleman, didn't play this spring because he's coming off of the injury. So if I'm Malachi Coleman, who has all the talent, all the speed, I got to be looking around going, I need to up my game and make a big jump between my freshman year and my sophomore year if I want to get in on this catch party, because there are quarterbacks who can get you the ball if you can make the play. And if you can't, you're going to be further down the depth chart than maybe what your resume coming into college was. And Coleman's not the only one. I don't mean to single him out, but he's got some catching up to do.
Guys, let's go through some of the stream. We'll get to your comments here on the Average Joe Sports Show live. Get your feedback, your thoughts on the spring game. A lot of it, first 16 minutes or so, has been on Dylan Raiola, appropriately so. Bill, you're right on with the wideouts. I'll kind of run down who all caught passes. We can talk about that wide receiver room because you want depth, but you also want a contingent of about 7 or 8 that you really trust. And what's really cool is Nebraska has all sorts of different body types to go with in that receiver room. But Dion's in. We mentioned Bob is in from Nashville. Good to have you. Walter from Philly says, I will not drink Kool-Aid unless it's loaded with vodka. We have vodka at the Schmidt house for you. I'll have to rewatch the game. I was pretty hammered during the second half. God love you, Walter. Walter.
How very average Joe of you.
That's right. And just for good measure, we'll just assume it's McCormick's. You're hammering the old well vodka. Our dear friend Connor Clark. Do I count in the starting 5? I don't know. Well,
hey, can we comment on Connor?
Yeah,
we were the 3 of us were walking to the stadium. Elijah went to hang out in downtown Lincoln, and we're walking down the street right by the Stadium Way right there. And who do we run into?
Connor.
But who was with him?
Help me.
His 2 female friends.
Oh yeah, okay.
But also the alcohol police were out yesterday because a campus police officer walked over to that young lady and he said, "What are you drinking?" And she said, "Oh." And he goes, "Just pour it out." I was like, "Good on Connor." Nice job.
Well,
here's the key.
I'm going to out Connor because when the alcohol police showed up, he went straight up Dumb and Dumber and was pointing and then turned around and
not me.
He was pointing to his 2 female
Need
pals.
some Salt Dog tickets,
officer. You may want to check what's in their glass. I don't know them. They just approached me.
And here's the advice for one. Was it like a red Solo cup? What type of
it was very much a rookie move by the young lady.
I was gonna say the way to go is you get yourself one of those foam gas station, like 32-ounce fountain drinks, and you put whatever's in there. And it's Sprite, it's Coke, it's whatever you want it to be. Make yourself a 32-ounce mixed drink, and you can really get things rocking too. Like if you want to do it right, that's the Elijah Herbel advice.
The 32-ounce big gulp with the Captain Morgan and the Diet Coke in it. It's a staple for youth baseball. Allegedly.
Look, here's the deal. Look, Connor. Look, if anybody can relate to it, when you're the voice of the Salt Dogs, you just got to get used to it. Okay. So I mean, I can. It's a legacy thing. So good on him.
Poor Connor with his voice. As soon as he opens up his mouth, he's going to get recognized. Like, just such a distinctive voice. I don't have a voice like that. It's great working in radio. People don't recognize me. Connor, as soon as he begins speaking, everyone just, that's Connor Clark. That's the voice of the Salt Dog. So.
And right now he's wishing he had not joined the stream. But anyway.
We have Patrick in. Rule of the day is checked in. Colin says, what's up? Colin in from South Bend. It's me, the average loser from South Bend. You're no such thing, Colin. You're spending your Saturday evening with us. Sunday. Right. I got it.
You're the loser.
Yeah. It's right on. So, guys, wide receiver room's good, though. Bonner, they're going to love playing him in the slot. Lloyd, your speed demon. Fedoni and Borkature at tight end. Nair, of course, is a guy that can thrill, and Jamal Banks. That's just a handful. Some of the young guys, Smith Flores had a couple of grabs. He looked nice. So Flint was in as well. Can Davon Hall too? Go ahead.
Can we include tight ends in this? Because I
think we do.
Own show in Omaha a while back that there's going to be some pros come out of that tight end room, and I think throughout the year they will continue to get better. And they'll be one of your more consistent rooms with pass catchers. And I think another thing, and I know we're going to probably talk a little bit about running backs and running the football. I think Nebraska feels really good at their perimeter blocking. Bill was alluding to Malachi Coleman earlier. Malachi warmed up on the field yesterday. Man, he's thick. He has his body. I mean, I think his body is starting to mature. He's a legit, and I asked, and I think Rule, I thought he was like 220, a fat guy trying to judge other people's weight. I could win a lot of money at the fair. But I was looking at him, I was like, that's about 220. I mean, he's a little bit bigger. Rule on air said 218. So, Malachi last year got talked about his blocking. They need to be consistent there, but I think they got some dudes on the edge. They're going to be able to seal the edge that will help with the running game. But I like that tight end room, guys. I think that tight end room is going to be chock full of guys that can block and also go out and catch passes. And it's just not Fedoni and Borkature, who I think are two Sunday guys.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly, your story reminded me of a quick one. A quick one just for me. I'll turn it back to football here in a second, Bill. You can get us back on track, I promise. Gary's story reminded me of this time. I was younger, probably 4th grade, 5th grade, and I went to a local gym to go to the swimming pool in the summertime. And there was this older gentleman in the locker room after we're done swimming.
Oh, boy.
No, it's not that bad, I promise. He's just in a towel, but
like Gladiator movies, Elijah.
No. He says, "Hey, bud, step up on that scale. I bet you I can guess your weight." Oh. And the dude was shockingly good at guessing my weight as a 4th grader. Consider I was on the heavier end of 4th graders. Like, the dude steps up and nails it. So it is a special talent to have. As I look back on that story, I get a little bit concerned because I didn't think of it as all that weird at the time. And now I look back and I go, kind of weird for a guy to be guessing my weight in the locker room, especially being in 4th grade. Your story just reminded me, Gary, you're not alone in this special talent of being able to guess weight. There's a man somewhere in Lincoln that's doing it in gym locker rooms.
That's horrible.
Did this gentleman also tell you, hey, one day you can play for me at Penn State?
Oh, wow. So Malachi Coleman in the official roster here is listed at 6'4", 190. So I just want to, you said I could go back to football.
Thankfully.
Yeah. So if he's 218, he's put on a little muscle, shall we say. Out of the ditch we go.
We got airlifted.
Truth hurts.
Did you have any like ice cream, or did you walk into the locker room with sweet treats? And I asked that because was it a hard decision to guess Elijah's weight in 4th grade? Were you a Husky kid or no?
Oh, yeah. No, I was Husky. I was.
Did you have to wear the jersey in midget football?
I was the double dot.
Yeah,
I actually
too heavy to carry the ball.
They wouldn't let me play rookie my first year, which was 4th grade. they moved me up to D because I exceeded the weight limit. So,
and you just mauled people at tackle. It's okay.
It worked. But yeah, dude guessed the weight well.
So we have Gray Woman chiming in. Elijah, that was an uncomfortable story from start to finish. No more locker room stories from Elijah. Brian checks in the stream. We've hit on the wideouts, guys. You want to talk running backs? We can. Any questions or thoughts? Jump in the stream, the Average Joe YouTube channel, or can tweet at us, the AJ Sports Pod. You want to be a friend of the Average Joe Sports Show from a sponsorship standpoint. The offering plate is there. It's the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com. Did the running backs do much for you yesterday, or does it matter because it was a day to showcase the quarterback development?
I don't think that there was much emphasis on that. And Matt Rule said that, well, I'm not too worried about the running back room. And I think I turned to you or somebody and said that's because they didn't plan on having a running game. They didn't plan on it. I'll tell you what, it did not dissuade me from being an Emmett Johnson fan. I really think that he's been overlooked, and I thought he was terrific at the second half of last year. Dowdell, I looked down, 7 carries, 76 yards. He had one big run, but those are good numbers. But I still think Emmett Johnson can be a more than serviceable running back in the Big Ten. Now, he can't be the every down back, and they don't need one based on what we saw with 51 pass attempts. And I would assume that Nebraska will be north of 40 pass attempts during the season, maybe north of 35, but I think you're going to see games where it's 40 plus. And so running backs are going to be getting that 7 carries for 76 yards type opportunities. But I think Johnson's good. I thought Dowdell was fine. And I'm anxious to see what happens when Ramir Johnson and Gabe Ervin come back.
I think Rule loves Ramir Johnson. And, Ramir went through the last week of spring. So Ramir's going to be into he's going to factor in all this. Dowdell had not had a great spring because they want him, when Nebraska runs inside zone, outside zone, some other things they do in the run game, they want those running backs to be able to complete all of those runs, but also they got to pass protect. They got to be able to run routes out of the backfield, the wheel route or screen, whatever, which because of the touch on the ball by Raiola, I think they'll be able to run the screen game pretty well. So that was encouraging to see Dowdell have a breakout on the 15th practice of the year. And that room, I don't think the coaches are concerned about it. I think it's more media and fans that are concerned at running back. I will tell you a guy, and he's not going to jump to the front of the line, and he might not be in the top 3 at the beginning of the year. I'm encouraged and intrigued by Quentin Ives.
Yeah.
I think there's something there, but he just needs to play football, But I saw enough where I went, oh, man, I want to see a little bit more. And so I don't know what his path will look like when they get into camp and, of course, into games. I hope he gets an opportunity maybe to play a little bit in the first couple of weeks of the season, even if it's in the fourth quarter and the game has been decided, because he did a couple of things as a running back, that is a bigger running back, 6'2", 6'3", that I'm like, wow, that's something to work with. That's what I took away a big one yesterday, guys, across the board. Outside of some of the fundamental stuff, I don't have shoddy tackling. It is what it is in a spring game. But I thought Nebraska looked well coached yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I think they look like the younger guys, whether they're redshirt freshmen or guys that just showed up, I thought they looked like they were comfortable out there and they belonged. That was a big takeaway, and that's why I throw Ives into that category, what led me to that thought.
One thing about running backs and getting attempts or opportunities to play, I think we can agree that won't be in the kickoff return game. Remember, they would try to, shoehorn guys some playing times and some opportunities to return kicks if they weren't getting carries. I think based on what we saw yesterday, maybe Nebraska has its first true return man since DeMornay Pearsonell, because Ja'Cory Barney looks pretty good and pretty comfortable returning kicks. And I think he has the potential to be somebody pretty spectacular.
Well, Barney, along with Lloyd, and let's be clear, Raiola, that's why I walk away from the spring game yesterday. It sounds a little ass backwards, but it's the reason why I walk away from the spring game less concerned about the running back position than when I walked into it. The offensive line was a standout performer. They're not going to get the sexy headlines. They only gave up 1 sack across both teams. yesterday. There probably should have been 2 on that touchdown to Fedoni. It didn't get whistled dead. It's a touchdown, whatever. But 1 sack across both teams yesterday. The offensive line did a good job opening holes. And let's be clear, the best player on that Husker offense, based on what I saw yesterday, is your quarterback and your true freshman quarterback. And I saw a guy, and I don't want to be too dramatic based on what we saw from one game, but I saw a guy that is, I think, going to be comfortable shouldering the load of the offense even more than I expected going into this spring game. And if you have a guy that's going to be stressing a defense deep, guys like Lloyd, guys like Barney, they're forcing the safeties to stay high, I think it's going to allow that offense line to open up some holes. And I feel a little bit better about a potential running back by committee. And that's where I feel like this team is probably at right now. Maybe someone differentiates themselves. Maybe Irvin and Ramir coming back can add to that room and set themselves apart. But whenever the best player on your offense is the quarterback, makes the job of the offensive line in the rushing game a little bit easy because of that deep threat that's going to open up some running lanes. And I saw an offensive line that opened up running lanes yesterday. I saw an offensive line that protected the quarterback. It made me feel more comfortable with the running game, despite the fact that I don't think Nebraska has a guy that's head and shoulders above the rest, a guy that you can put in pencil as your starting running back here in the fall. I don't know who that first guy that's going to be out there with Dylan Raiola is this fall, but I know that they're not going to have to shoulder the load of the offense like they had to last season.
Okay, do we have a prediction board on this show?
We can
is that
make one
now.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my first prediction. Nebraska will have either a second or third team All Big Ten wide receiver.
It's fair. I think so. Will they have a first or second team? How many first or second team All Big Ten guys do they have? I mean, we can talk all freshmen, sure, but with the offensive line and wide receiver room, I mean, do you feel like you've got a couple of candidates on the offensive line? I think you do, and Ben Hart and Scott. And if Teddy stays healthy, I know sky's the limit for as talented as he is. Can you have 2 to 3 on the line? Can you get a Banks and a Fedoni out of the wide receiver / tight end room? I mean, those are some candidates on the offensive side.
Well, let's be honest. So Nebraska just went through a 3-day stretch where they didn't get anybody drafted. It's the second time since 19. It's the first time since 19. It's the second time since 1962. No guys drafted. Now, granted, there's a couple of guys came back that if they were in the draft, they probably would have been drafted, but it's still a goose egg that you're wearing. If you want to get drafted next year, and Nebraska has 3 or 4 candidates, and you want to be All Big Ten, first, second, or third team, or however the new Big Ten is going to do their all conference teams, you got to win some football games, okay? You got to win to get drafted and to get a lot of attention and to get that accolade. And if you're going to say we want to be the best defense in the country, dude, you probably got to have an All-American on that side of the ball, and you got to have a collection of All Big Ten guys. And I don't know that Nebraska has a collection. They have some candidates. But I think if you look on the offensive side of the ball, certainly if you want to go where you think you're going to go, you got to have some guys winning postseason honors. Back to the wide receiver. Jalen Lloyd will be either second or third team All Big Ten.
Okay. That's your
I was in on him last year. I've seen him for a while. I'm glad that people have stopped with the narrative that it's a track guy playing wide receiver. You know what he is? He is an incredible athlete that is a wide receiver playing wide receiver, and he has worked at his craft, and he's going places, man. He knows how to play that position, his ability to track the ball. And there were a couple of other wide receivers that I was like, whoa, they're being rewarded for running the right route and beating a defender, and a quarterback is finding them. But their ability to track the football is something that cannot be undersold. And Jalen has really, really upped his game there. But across the board, he is turning himself into a bona fide, legit, I got to worry about that wide receiver every time I'm putting together a scouting report.
And to your point, Gary, if you go back and watch that long touchdown from Raiola to Lloyd, Raiola is going to get a lot of credit for that. Go back and rewatch that play and see how Jalen Lloyd is able to track that football out of the hand and break out of a post route and get upfield. Because Raiola, he did what a quarterback is supposed to do. You're going to lead your wide receiver away from the hit, away from the safety over the middle of the field. And given the fact that he had beaten the corner, you're going to lead him deep. hopefully towards the end zone. Jalen Lloyd, as soon as that ball's out of the hand, breaks out of his what appeared to be a post route, gets upfield, gets up the numbers, makes the catch in stride. That's a credit to Raiola, but is able to go finish the play. I was impressed, and it took me a couple of watches to see what Lloyd did there. The ability that he had to track the football is exactly what you're saying. That's not a track guy playing football. That's a football guy. To be able to see that ball out of the hand, make the adjustment, get upfield, make the catch, and finish, score a touchdown, really, really impressive. And it flies under the radar because it was a great throw from Raiola, don't get me wrong, but an almost even better play from Lloyd to be able to track that ball upfield and get there.
It was impressive. Colin from South Bend, Nayor, Banks, Lloyd on the field at the same time could cause some problems, major problems for a lot of defenses. Really kind words from the other Elijah. They are live, gents. Appreciate the kind words, Elijah. And that's good stuff from you.
I promise that's not my burner.
No. And if it is, we don't want to know.
But the receiver, Matt Rule, had a good comment. I think he was relaying it from somebody else. But the quarterback can't play, should not try to play wide receiver. Just play quarterback. Yeah. And that goes to the chemistry that we've talked about. That's the most interesting thing to me this spring is how well Raiola, Harburg, Kalen adjust to the newfound speed and talent that Nebraska, I was really impressed with, has at the receiver position. Put the ball where it's supposed to be, but doesn't have to be perfect. Let the guy on the other end do his job. And if you have good catch radius, you got receivers who know how to catch the ball and who are experienced. That's going to make a huge difference in Raiola's success or Harburg or Kalen's. Is if they just do their job and let the receivers do theirs, as we believe that they probably can, that's going to make the passing game so much better. How many times have we seen in the last years where the attempt to be perfect on every pass has resulted in disaster? You mentioned Gary earlier in the show, the simply throwing the ball out of bounds to live and play another down, right? Trust me, I am not going to go back and look at the freaking film, all 22 from last year, but I bet there were probably 2 or 3 interceptions on sideline passes that were trying to be precise to throw one into a tight window, and it ended up getting picked off. I think there was one at Colorado, that was kind of a backbreaker, maybe one at Minnesota early on. Just throw it away. Have those kinds of smarts. But if you have the receivers that can make the play and you lead them in the right direction, let them do their job. They don't have to be the receiver, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Quickly here, while we're talking the receivers and the quarterbacks, what do you guys make of the run-pass split yesterday? You think that's a show for the fans, or you think that's a preview of what we're going to see next season? Because we walked away from last spring game, I was like, oh, the fumble issues, that'll be cleaned up by the year. It's just a show. It's not that important. I look at yesterday, and I look at, the combined passing attempts from both teams was, I think, 60 passing attempts as compared to, quick math here, 37 rushing attempts. Is that a split that I think we can expect?
That's for those guys that were priority recruits that they brought out to the middle of the field while they were warming up. That was for those guys. And you listen to from Michael Terry, who's a 5-star wide receiver, some of the comments the day after, it was strictly for those guys, which is fine. That's part of, I called it a social event. It's Nebraska's spring social event. And it was, it was a nice respite for those of us that live here in Omaha after what happened on Friday. But it's also a spring game that is, get in, get out. Unfortunately, there's 2 injuries that I know we'll talk about, but it's for the recruits here to say, hey, we've got this quarterback. How would you like to be catching balls from him in your career? Because he's going to be here for at least a couple of years as long as he stays healthy. So I think that is for the recruits, but also for them to see a little bit and to test some guys under duress that are playing the defensive backfield.
Guys, just to make a comment about what the offense will be or need to be, Satterfield's not wrong. You got to be able to throw the football to win, and Nebraska didn't or couldn't last year. You feel better about that after yesterday with Dylan Raiola. You feel better about that with Harburg. And you feel better about a guy in Danny Kalen that showed a lot of poise with that 2-minute drill. I mean, I thought Kalen showed remarkable poise. He's not going to be the headline, but you feel good about your arsenal. Nebraska is Matt Rule, and what I mean by that, they are going to be physical, they're going to be tough, and they're going to be able to run the football. Now, the thing that's going to be new next year, what you'll see for the first time under Rule and for the first time in a while for Nebraska, they're going to be able to do what they want, presumably, with a game plan. There's not going to be any question marks going in with, well, okay, where are we mismatched in a bad way? Where do we need to be cautious on the offensive side? Nebraska is going to want to run the football. They're going to have to run the football, and that's absolutely a priority. So you're not putting it all on a freshman quarterback. You're going to need to be getting 3, 4, 5. Be great on first down. Make it 2nd and 5 and really open this offense up for a run pass option. So I think you'll still have 60-40 run to pass split. We'll see if Sat gets crazy and starts spinning the wheel and it's 87 straight pass plays. Well, I'm sure we'll chirp about it.
I still think running the ball is going to be a firm part of this offense. But what I see yesterday, and one of the things I said on our other show during the pregame yesterday was I was hoping we'd see a performance from Dylan Raiola that reminded me of Quinn Ewers at Texas. Whenever he stepped in and took that job and really changed that offense. One of the things with that offense, they had 2 really, really good running backs with Quinn. I know Quinn spent some of that year injured, but you had Bijan Robinson and you had Roshan Johnson. 2 guys that were very, very solid. Texas, with a young Quinn Ewers, still ran the football, but they threw the ball to open up the run. They did not run the ball to open up the pass for Ewers. They understood that Ewers was a guy that was going to make their offense tick. They threw the football in order to open up the running lanes for Bijan and Roshan, and that's not completely the hard and fast rule. There were some games where they did run the hell out of the football and didn't put that much on Quinn Ewers' plate. But like you look at the Bama game, whenever they were playing some top opponents, they were throwing to set up the run. And I wonder if that's more what Nebraska's offense will be, a balanced split between the two, but use the pass to open up the run as opposed to vice versa. I wonder if that's what it's going to be, because I will say I saw some shades of what Quinn Ewers was able to provide to Texas in Dylan Raiola, in that he was able to make the throws and he was able to be a young guy leading the offense and really being the best guy on the field, despite the fact there's some good talent around him. I'm going to stick with that. I am curious to see what it looks like by the time UTEP rolls into town, but I do think that it may be an offense based on what we saw yesterday that, while balanced, uses the pass to set up the run as opposed to what we saw, really for years here at Nebraska.
Guys, let's spend a minute here on the injury situation. And you have Bly Hill go down. You have Demetrius Bell go down. And that is gut-wrenching. The way Rule put it in the postgame was extensive injury situation with Bly Hill and Demetrius Bell. And Sharpie and Bill, a thought here with where you go now for that other corner. Because Rule also said earlier in the week, if he had to play tomorrow, it would have been Hill and Hill, Tommy and Bly at the corner spot. You have Ethan Nation, you have some options, but man, you felt great about what Bly Hill was doing.
He seemed to be one of the finds of the portal season, didn't he? And Demetrius Bell, such a great story, didn't play last year, and by all accounts, it had a great spring up until that moment. So those are 2 heart-wrenching things out of the game that will have a lasting impact, I think. Now Nebraska has depth at receiver, but Demetrius Bell is very popular on that team. I think Bly Hill had done a great job in getting acclimated to his new team. I wonder if Nebraska is not taking a look at the waiver wire or the transfer portal,
Either way.
before it closes, right? There's obviously one big one out west. If you're going to try and bring somebody in, or do you say, all right, Malcolm, we moved you to safety. We need you to go back to corner. And that, I think, is a tough ask, even though he does have experience, but that's a tough ask to make the move during spring ball, get acclimated to being a safety, and then being asked to go back again after spring ball is over with.
I'm gonna knock on wood and say, gosh dang it, because I said Nebraska had made it through 14 practices without anything significant. And then Demetrius Bell goes down. And I mean, in the press box, guys, you could hear him scream. I mean, that was not good. Now, Bly Hill's injury, I don't know, if we'll get an update this week. So Rule didn't group them together. He said Bly's was semi-significant to his patella. Now, whatever that means, will he be 4 months now ready to go in camp? But this is something to keep an eye on. Nebraska was already connected to a couple of cornerbacks that were in the portal before Saturday. And so I don't know what that process looks like moving forward. But I will say something about the cornerback position. And, we kind of say, hey, Evan Cooper, you're one of the best coaches on this staff. Look at all that depth. Go get them, guy. They got some guys that, haven't played a lot of football that are going to have to prove themselves. But I wonder if we saw Ethan Nation make a big jump yesterday. He made an interception, but I think another play that he made, he got locked up on I think it was a wide receiver, and Dowdell was running the football. And in the open field, Nation broke away from his blocker and was able to make a tackle on Dowdell, who is, he's not a slight fella. So Ethan Nation looked pretty good yesterday, and I would think that he's in the mix, for that spot opposite Tommy Hill for cornerback. But there's not a lot of guys. I think there's a lot of promise back there, but there's probably not a lot of guys that you go, oh, yeah, I can count on him. So it's going to be a big summer for that room. But, they were already kicking the tires on some cornerbacks. I wonder if that ramped up late last night and into today and what that looks like for the next couple of days. Guys don't have to make a decision by May 1. They just have to be in the portal by May 1.
And that's got to be the number one position group we're looking at on the entire team of having some departures, that defensive back room. It's so crowded. Are you in the same boat, guys? I think that's the number one spot where I look for departures is the defensive back room.
Yeah, you'll see.
I can't pinpoint it.
Some potential attrition there, but I think Nebraska's created a great culture and kind of hub for guys that want to stay and get better and work at it. I mean, they've done a good job of defining roles for players too, young guys across the board, offense, defense, special teams, where guys can see a future if they just keep working. I mean, that's the thing about this staff and this team's mantra is you're going to get what you earn. So the expectation is to come in and work at it and keep working, and we'll give you a shot. We'll give you a look. And it has served them well so far. I want to ask the room this question, and going back to offense for a second. And Sharpie, maybe you can explain this a little better for me or to me, and then some of our audience. But lay it out, and Bill, you chime in too. Same with you, Elijah. The RPO part of this offense, and Rule ran it at Baylor, the run pass option where you can call a run play, but turn it into a pass play just at the drop of a hat while the play's happening. I mean, that's the RPO part of it. But what can this offense be with a guy like Raiola pulling the trigger in an RPO? How well set up is Nebraska with their skill guys to really cause damage to defenses with the RPO element?
I think yesterday you saw that. I mean, that's a great question because they ran RPO. You got to have a quarterback, again, just simply playing pitch and catch. I'm going to throw you the ball 5 to 7 yards away, and it's going to be where you can catch it, but it's not going to be where you can catch it and you have to adjust, and that little adjustment allows the defender to come up and make a tackle. I think Nebraska can be really successful in the RPO game because they have a quarterback that can complete that toss, play guys in space, but go back to something we were all talking about earlier. They have some guys that can seal an edge on the perimeter blocking. So all of a sudden you're playing RPO and you're getting it out and you're getting it into the flat. And you basically, if you block it correctly, you have a tunnel where that wide receiver with great speed they hear the gun pop, and they're like, man, I'm back running the 100 at Burke Stadium, and here we go. So I think they're just going back to the quarterback and Dylan, who's we're talking about. The ability to make all the type of throws is going to open up this offense. I think you're going to see a ton of crossing routes where you lead the wide receiver, where they can make a catch, because you saw it a couple of times yesterday, actually with all the quarterbacks, where they can make a catch and they can continue the crossing route and then turn it upfield, where a bad throw behind, now there were throws behind guys, either a pick or an intercept or an incompletion, but most of the time they ran crossing routes, guys were able to catch it in stride and then turn it up. And so there was just so much more flow to the offense because you can make throws and guys are running the right routes. And so all of these things like tie into each other. But the RPO game, I think you will see it in the RPO and screen game will actually be a lot better than it's been probably in a couple of years here.
The key area with Nebraska's RPO going forward, at least for the next couple of foreseeable years, is the O and the run does not include the quarterback, right? Yeah. The days of Adrian Martinez playing with a broken jaw or Heinrich Harburg, with his 20 carries a game. The run and the pass, the options belong to the running backs and the receivers, and it is not going to be up to Raiola or I even think Heinrich Harburg. They're not going to put the quarterback in harm's way. The quarterback run is just not going to be part of it. The 3rd down and 8, Jamal Lord quarterback draw, not happening anymore. So they're going to have to be good in that short passing game. I think a guy like Bonner, I did not have him on my, and I hate the term, on my bingo card because it's gotten so overused, but I did not see Bonner being the pass catcher. But what is he, like 220, 230? You get him free, not just to catch some passes, but to get downfield to block for whomever does get the ball in that little 5-7 yard pass play. The damage he can do on a linebacker at that size and that speed, or on a defensive back, he could be a real trigger to short pass plays becoming long pass plays in that RPO. I think that's a guy that is underrated right now in terms of what they want to do offensively. And people like him, not just him. I think they're going to he might be a prototype for the kind of player that they can utilize in a pass game, as opposed to when he was the fullback last year that got the fullback trap on the first play of the spring game to honor Frank Solich.
Quickly here, guys, as we kind of discuss the RPO game, this comment here from Colin I want to discuss briefly. He says no defense will fear RPO while Dylan is at quarterback. He's a phenomenal passer, but he has offensive lineman speed. I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment because it's not the running threat of Dylan in the RPO that's going to stress the defense. It's the guy next to Dylan or behind Dylan. Yeah. And it's that processing power that we saw yesterday from Dylan to be able to make the right throw. Like the fact that you have to respect the pass opening up the running lanes. That's what I was saying earlier with using the pass to set up the run. The fact that you have to be concerned about Dylan Raiola hitting Jalen Lloyd on a slant and potentially going 30 yards. It's not Raiola getting around the edge that is going to be the concern to defenses in the passing game. It's Dylan Raiola pulling it from the running back's gut and quickly hitting a bubble or hitting a slant route that is a 3-yard pass that turns into 30 yards. That's what's going to concern, and that's going to stress the defense. We all saw the kind of similar nature that Raiola and Mahomes have from the quarterbacking position. I extend that even to running the football. Like Mahomes will break one off every once in a while. It's not what stresses a defense. Like Mahomes getting outside and going for 40 yards is not what stresses the defense. It's Mahomes on 3rd and 5 getting outside the pocket and getting 6 yards and skirting out of bounds. That's what stresses the defense. That's why I think Raiola is going to be able to do well. And he's going to be able to do that well because the defense is going to have their back turned. They're playing man-to-man coverage because he can pick apart his zone. At least that is the hope from the Husker coaching staff. Like that's how it stresses the defense. It's not his running ability, though, that stresses the defense in an RPO. It's his ability to throw the football that opens up the rushing lanes that gets a guy like Ramir or Gabe or Dowdell or Emmett, gets them some extra rushing lanes, and that's where they start getting some chunk plays on the ground. As soon as the defense has to respect that, the passing lanes behind him for a slant to go 30 yards are then opened up. That's how this RPO of Nebraska would affect a defense, not through his legs.
The old pop pass tight end seam is going to be a thing of glory, possibly, where you fake the old handoff and the quick little pop pass up the seam, the tight end, find your wideouts. It's going to be nice. Guys, as we wind down the first live Average Joe Sports Show, and give us a subscription, tell a friend, and like us on YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Pod. Give us a follow on Twitter, Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. And if you want to be a friend of the Average Joe, shoot us a email, the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com. We got to talk field goals. Overreaction, panic, or just a bad day with a game and a team that is chasing three. And Nebraska had some opportunity. Tristan Alvano and Coach Foley talked about needing to be better at the field goal spot because Alvano was okay for a freshman, but you want it to be better. He was 1 for 3 yesterday at the end of the first half, hooked one, missed his first attempt, nailed his last attempt. Concern? Are you guys worried about the field goal kicking, or it won't matter because it's just going to be touchdowns from Dylan?
Well, I do think it's an important thing to discuss because by the time fall rolls around, if you don't have a kicker that you can trust, 4th and 6 becomes a go for it down from like the 30-yard line, 35-yard line. It changes how you have to game plan your team. And I think as of right now, what Nebraska has, and I hope I'm proven otherwise by the time the season starts, but what I've seen is Nebraska has an inconsistent kicker, a guy with a big leg, a guy that's got potential, but at the current moment, especially when the lights are bright, he's gotten a little bit inconsistent. And I'm not out on Alvano being a potential long-term option at kicker for this Husker football team, but in the kicking game, you make your money in consistency. The guys that stay in the league for a while, it's not necessarily the guys that are booting him 60 yards, even though we've been seeing that more. It's the guys that, you know what, if it's 40 yards and in, it's going to be 3 points. If it's between 40 and 50, you feel good about it being 3 points. Those are the guys that stick and stay in the NFL, and that's not what Nebraska has right now. Consistency is the name of the game, what you have to have as a kicker. I don't think Tristan Alvano's there right now. Again, I'm not out on him being able to develop and being better by the time the season rolls around. But as of right now, you have to roll under the assumption that Nebraska has an inconsistent kicker, and an inconsistent kicker is not a kicker you can trust.
Is it mental or physical?
Mental.
Mental.
Okay.
Maybe you should lace it up like Kevin Seibel did.
Help me there.
Straight on.
Oh,
super toe.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think so I've seen Tristan make a lot of big kicks, and he made big kicks in that stadium for Westside. And last year he had he rode the roller coaster of a freshman kicker, and I equate his career to Drew Brown. Drew Brown had a really bad freshman year, and I don't remember what he did in his spring game before his sophomore year, but then he kind of settled in. I think it's mental right now. Now, when the season rolls around and they play UTEP, I still expect Alvano to be the place kicker and Buschini to be the punter, but that does not give a pass to Ed Foley's crew. Nebraska needs to be better on special teams. They need to have the Buschini that is the boomer and not the, what we saw last year. They need Tristan to be more consistent, and I think it's mental. But here's the thing. Tristan Alvano, Elijah Herbel, Bill Doleman, or Chris Schmidt kicking field goals. Nebraska needs to be better inside of 40 yards. And I think that's Tristan 40 and longer. Boy, doesn't he look a lot more comfortable? And then you get inside of the 40, and I don't know if it's the left or right hash, but boy, it seems to miss by a lot. So that's something they've got to overcome in the offseason. And I still have faith that will be. But boy, if your whole motto is chasing three and you're telling a quarterback, don't put us in harm's way so that we're out of field goal range, throw the ball away, you're expecting for that kicker to roll in when you're at the 17-yard line, and that's a 34-yard field goal, and you weren't able to get further in the red zone, that kicker's going to put 3 up. Yep. So it's something, I think it's something to be discussed and to keep an eye on. They've got to have a big offseason, and I think Tristan then has to have a big camp going in to get ready for the season. But, that's one thing from yesterday where we all went, uh-oh, I wasn't expecting that.
And they have young kickers coming in, so there will be competition in the fall. And I agree. If the consistency isn't there early on, then they could have options. But hey, I think they should have called it chasing 4 because I don't think we should be playing for ties. But that's just me.
Now, I'll also add here, based on what I saw yesterday, I think in this upcoming season, you'll feel better about Nebraska picking up a 4th and 4 in plus territory than you did last year, which is something that you can keep in the back of your mind if these kicker struggles continue. It's not what you want to be your bread and butter. You don't want to have to go for it and only go for touchdowns. But I do think you'll feel better with the guy that Nebraska has at quarterback at going and picking up a 4th down conversion. This is a terrible comparison. I'm going to make it anyway. Like whenever Mahomes has the ball 4th and 4, Chiefs fans have a level of confidence in them that Patrick Mahomes is going to step up and make the right play. As long as the receiver doesn't drop it, he's probably going to find the open guy. And if there's not a guy open, he's going to use his legs and try to pick up that 1st down. Gary can speak to it more as a Chiefs fan. I think there is that level of confidence from Chiefs fans on 4th down that they have a quarterback that's going to get it done. I'm not saying Nebraska is going to have that next year, but Nebraska has that type of guy at quarterback based on what I've seen and what I've heard, that if it comes down to it and you got to pick up a 4th down because you don't trust the kicker in a late game moment, I think Nebraska is going to feel better about that than they have in recent years just because of the guy Raiola is.
Now, I like Butker if he's not able to get that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Butker from 60.
I think this whole discussion, we do have to keep this in mind. There's a guy that was playing quarterback yesterday that gives you hope, but remember, he's going to have to adjust as the season goes on. I mean, that's the thing to keep in mind is, man, there's enough there to work with that is a great baseline, but you can't throw everything on his plate. Now, if you do and he comes through, the world is wide open and that ceiling is just raised. But I think you got to keep that in mind. He's still a freshman, and there's 85 other guys that are on scholarship that are going to wear opposing uniforms. They have tape as well, but they do feel, I think, confident, to your point, Elijah, that in those situations, even if you don't make the 1st down, you're not going to make a play that hurts the team. Okay? Last year, Nebraska made too many plays that hurt themselves. They won't make plays that hurt themselves. It either keeps it neutral. It's either going to be a positive or it's going to be neutral. And I think that'll go a long way in helping this team win more football games or be in positions to succeed late in games.
One note before we go. One fumble yesterday. And it was a drop snap by the quarterback, but only one time was the ball on the turf. There was also one interception, but they did take care of the football better yesterday. And I know it was spring. I know the polar bear didn't play and all of that, but only one time was the ball on the carpet. I think that was nice.
Multiple wins yesterday.
Fundamentally, they look pretty good for a spring game, where spring games are not easy, man. They got all kinds of guys playing, different kind of combinations. Guys are switching teams. I thought fundamentally they looked pretty good yesterday. I mean, that's at least a start. I know I might get crushed for saying that, but as watching it with a football eye, I'm like, I can appreciate that because spring games are a little wonky. I mean, maybe the guy that is next to you, you didn't play a lot with him in spring, and all of a sudden he's there. But I agree with you, Bill. Only putting the ball on the carpet one time compared to last year where, 6 fumbles?
And you just said, well, that's just a spring game.
But it's something that gives me – I'm going to watch for the future is there are things that Rule is finding out about this football team that he did last year and he's doing so far this year that he says we're working on. And for the most part, they've come to fruition. If you say in spring, one of our goals is to take the ball away, still work in progress, but not give it away. And I watched the spring game and you only throw one interception and have one fumble. I'm like, I get it. Okay, what's the next thing? Because I believe in things that you notice and you say our team's going to work on to fix.
That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Thanks for checking us out. The live rendition of the Average Joe Sports Show. We'll be back at you later on in the week, and we'll try and make a habit of doing this as we get closer to kickoff on Sundays with a little bit of a – go ahead.
Can I say one thing here? We just went an hour and 4 minutes, and this was fun doing this live. We've all kind of done this before, but this is the first time with the Average Joe Sports Show. we didn't even talk about, you know what? Did once we talk about defense as a segment?
No, we didn't. But I didn't know where to go defensively as far as what we saw and what yesterday was supposed to be about.
Spring game wasn't about the defense.
Yeah.
Oh, Elijah.
That's why Gifford and
Elijah,
Hutmacher.
Turn in your black shirt there, Elijah.
No, Tony at halftime. No, keep it on.
We're not guessing your weight again.
Tony, yeah. Tony was pissed at halftime. Too many big plays, not enough pressure. I don't think that some of the tackling wasn't good, but you didn't have your main dudes. That's what I'm going to say.
Hey, and those guys along the front, those guys along the front, and the front seven are pretty athletic, and they know that their mission, their assignment is to see the ball and go hit the guy with the ball, and they were not allowed to go hit the guy with the ball very often yesterday. So I kind of give them a pass.
I think it was a good day for Nebraska. You know what? Yep. They showed you enough that you can see progress, and there's something there to work with. I don't know if it changed any of our opinion of what we think the season's going to be like, but at least they have a good baseline. Their baseline is a lot better than they had at the end of last year, in my opinion. Not spring ball last year, but when they walked off the field against Iowa, I think what they have to work with at where they're at is higher than it was on Black Friday of 2023.
Totally agree. I think you can see some upside, feel some upside with some of the known commodities that are back, but you can dream about where the offense can jump now.
Yep.
With a really nice option / starter at quarterback potentially.
Sorry, it was a good show.
Yeah. Sorry. Also, we didn't get to. We had history made yesterday. I think we were all kind of together in the press box. Did you know history happened at the spring game yesterday?
I missed this apparently.
Did you know that was the first time that the Scarlets had performed at midfield?
No.
How about that for you? You're not getting that on any other show, any other podcast, except for the Average Joe Sports Show.
Defense,
because we're thinking of the average Joe and Jane out there that is wondering about the Scarlets.
Okay.
What a poll from Gary Sharp.
We'll have to get a Scarlet on the show.
Because they always stick them in the corner by the student section.
Yeah.
Halftime, they're right there at midfield. I mean, they don't let us say no to drugs anymore, so let's bring out the Scarlets. It's like a dream for the Husker male fan.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We'll be back at you next time. That's Gary Sharp. We'll try and get a Scarlet on for an interview. Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel.
That would be Elijah's area of expertise.
Chris Schmidt. Yeah, we would scare.
There's three of us on the show that would probably be doing time in Lancaster County. Go get them, Elijah.
That's good. All right, Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe on YouTube, the AJ Sports Pod. Like and follow on Twitter. And you want to be a friend of the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Show at gmail.com, where you go to send us an email. Sharpie, Bill, Elijah, we'll holler again next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. It's fun.
Thank you.